Hello, welcome everyone. In this lesson video, I will be introducing elevation and depression. This video is a prerequisite for the main lesson video on elevation and depression. In this topic, the questions are crafted in such a way that there is always an observer. What I have on the board is like a human eye. That's what I call the observer. Then this observer is assumed to always look straight. The observer looks straight. And this straight horizontal line is called normal. So that is the normal eye level of this observer. Then if anything happens and the observer looks below the normal, it is called depression. So this is depression line. If the observer looks above normal, it is called elevation. So this is elevation line. Now, an angle is formed here. I will name it alpha. And also an angle is formed here. I will name it beta. The angle formed between the elevation line and normal is called angle of elevation, while the angle formed between the normal and the depression line is called angle of depression. Don't forget, every observer must have a normal, which is a straight horizontal line. Then, in elevation and depression, there are objects that are used in crafting the questions. We use dots to represent objects, except these ones I will write on the board now. Objects like tower, building, cliff, mountain, trees, flagpole, lamp pole, hill, and human height. Once these objects are mentioned, you are bound to use vertical lines to represent them. Any other object apart from these ones, we use dots to represent them. So if tower is mentioned, use a vertical straight line to represent them. So for each of these, use vertical straight line to represent them. But anything outside this list, use just a dot to represent that. Then finally, in this introductory video, we'll have the formula we use for our calculations. Each time you represent the question on a diagram, you are likely to form a triangle. Every sketch drawn in elevation and depression will result to a triangle, and mostly right-angled triangle. So most times we'll get right-angled triangle, And because we get right angle triangles, we use what we call SOHCAHTOA. That is trigonometry, where S stands for sine, which is opposite over hypotenuse. C stands for cosine, which is adjacent over hypotenuse. Then T stands for tangent, which is opposite over adjacent. That's what we use to do the calculations. By the time you draw your sketch and arrive at a triangle, you are supposed to use any of these based on what we are looking for. So, in conclusion, I said, in every question on this topic, there is always an observer. Either that the observer is looking up or is looking down, is observing something down or something up. If he's looking up, that's the elevation. If he's looking down, that's a depression. And don't forget, there is always a normal. A normal is a straight horizontal line. And the angle formed between the elevation line and the normal is angle of elevation, while the one formed between normal and depression line is angle of depression. These objects require vertical straight lines when you want to represent them, while every other object use dots for that. For the calculations, these are what we use: sine, cosine, tangent. We call it SOHCAHTOA, where sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent opposite over adjacent. And then a quick reminder that in a right angle triangle where you have three sides, the side facing the right angle is always the longest side, which is the hypotenuse. So this is what we call the hypotenuse. B is the hypotenuse. While these two other ones depend on the position of the angle in the triangle. If the angle is up here, let's say theta, C becomes the opposite, the side facing the angle, while A is the adjacent. But if you change the position of the angle down here, A becomes the opposite, the side facing the angle, while C becomes the adjacent. In the next lesson video, I will go straight into calculations involving elevation and depression. See you there.